They say a woman knows when her heart is being replaced, and I felt it long before I had proof, but I never imagined how cruel the truth would be. I gave that man 40 years of my life, bore his children, nursed his parents, and stood by him when no one else did. And when my health failed me, when I became just a shadow of the woman I once was, he turned away. No worse. He turned to her, and when I tested him with the last ounce of strength I had left, he chose her. This is not just a story of betrayal. It's the cruelest twist of fate. I'm Evelyn, 67 years old, a retired nurse, now battling late-stage liver disease. And this is the story of how I uncovered the truth too late, but still in time to take back my power. I always believed Thomas loved me. He wasn't an emotional man, but he showed affection in gestures, filling my gas tank, folding laundry, or kissing my forehead when he thought I was asleep. We raised 2 boys together, built a modest life, and never really needed much until my body betrayed me. The diagnosis came like a thief in the night. First fatigue, then jaundice, then tests, and more tests, until the doctor sat me down and said it aloud, end-stage cirrhosis. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. But there it was in my liver, eating me alive. At first, Thomas was supportive. He drove me to my appointments, brought me soup in bed, even joked that it was his turn to be the nurse. But after the 2nd month, something changed. He started coming home later. He was on his phone, more turning the screen away when I walked in. I caught him humming again, something he hadn't done in years. At first, I thought maybe he was just finding his own way to cope with my illness. Then came the perfume. A sweet citrus scent I hadn't worn in decades clung to his collar. I asked about it, and he waved me off. Must have been someone at the office. The red lipstick on the receipt from a dinner for 2. Oh, a client meeting, he said. But it wasn't the lies that hurt the most. It was how good he'd gotten at telling them. My health was deteriorating quickly, and I needed to be sure. I couldn't spend what little time I had left wondering if I'd wasted my life. So I made a plan. I told Thomas the hospital bills had drained our savings, that I'd cashed out my pension early to cover expenses, that the house might have to go. And I watched him. The man who once kissed my forehead now grimaced at my touch. His smile faded completely. He barely spoke to me. Until one morning I heard him whisper on the phone, "She's almost out of money. We don't have to wait much longer." And that's when I knew. The moment I heard those words, "We don't have to wait much longer," something inside me died. Not because he was cheating. I had suspected that. Not because he wanted to leave. I could have lived with that too. What crushed me was the realization that he had already left, long before I even asked for the truth. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was just an obligation he was waiting to be free of. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, letting his betrayal seep deep into my bones. Then I decided if he was willing to abandon me when I had nothing, I needed to know if he ever truly loved me at all. That was the moment the test was born. I began with a phone call to our accountant. I transferred my real savings, what was left of my inheritance from my father, to a private account under a new name. The house was still in both our names, but I called my lawyer and began quietly drafting changes. Then I told Thomas everything he wanted to hear. "Tom," I said softly one morning, eyes lowered like a defeated woman, "I think it's time to sell the house. The bills. I just can't keep up anymore." He blinked, once, then nodded. "If that's what you think is best, Evie." That was it. No protest, no hug, no reassurance. I watched the man I loved for 4 decades fold into indifference with the ease of slipping off a coat. The next few weeks were a blur of pretend misery. I canceled our weekly dinners with friends, telling them I was too sick. I sold my jewelry one piece at a time, at least in his eyes. In truth, I was only moving it into a safety deposit box downtown. I wore thrift store cardigans and let my hair go gray without touch-ups. I even told our sons not to send money. Don't worry, Mom's fine, just downsizing so they wouldn't ruin the illusion. All the while I watched Thomas drift further and further away. He spent more time at work, left his phone face down, and smelled more like cologne than home. I began to take notes, times receipts, even photos when I could. Not because I wanted to expose him yet, but because I wanted to remember what truth looked like when it finally shattered all my illusions. One afternoon, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed. I saw the listing. Does this mean you're finally free? My hand shook, but I didn't cry. I just smiled. He thought I had nothing left. He thought I was desperate, weak, dying. But what he didn't know was that the test wasn't just for him, it was for me too. And now I had my answer. The man I loved was gone. The man in his place had failed me completely. But I wasn't finished yet. No, not by a long shot. They always say women have a sixth sense, and mine had been screaming for years, muffled only by loyalty and love. But now that I'd seen the messages, the cheap little secrets, the whispered phone calls when he thought I was asleep, I let go of the last thread of denial. I knew who she was. Her name was Colleen. I remembered her from a charity event 2 years ago. Blonde, too young, all teeth and perfume, clinging to her wine glass like it held her dignity. She'd been introduced to me as Tom's coworker. They laughed too easily, stood too close. I remembered brushing it off. Of course he'd never, not Tom. Now I saw it for what it had been, the start of the end. I followed the signs. His shirts began to smell faintly of her citrus perfume again. He started buying new clothes, cologne whitening strips. At night, while I lay awake listening to the oxygen machine hum softly beside me, he whispered promises on the phone. Sometimes he used my name when talking to her. Evelyn doesn't suspect a thing. And he was right. I didn't suspect. I knew. Still, I said nothing. I played my role, frail, confused, poor. I shuffled around the house like a ghost, while he paraded his second life without shame. But one night I followed him. I borrowed my neighbor's car, sweet old Donna bless her, and trailed him after he left the house in a rush, claiming he had a late meeting at the office. He wasn't careful anymore. He didn't need to be. He thought I was too tired, too ill, too broken to notice. He pulled into a restaurant I recognized, the same one where he proposed to me 43 years ago. I watched them through the window, his hand on hers, their heads tilted close, laughter spilling like wine. When the dessert came, she leaned over and kissed his cheek. He didn't flinch. He smiled. My chest didn't ache the way I thought it would. No tears came, only ice. Because in that moment, watching them in our place, I realized the truth. The man sitting across from her wasn't someone I loved anymore. He was a stranger who had stolen my years, my trust, and now my dignity, but not for much longer. I took a picture, just one, them together, smiling wine glasses raised like they were celebrating something. Then I drove home. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, that photo in hand, and stared at the man who stumbled in past midnight, smelling of whiskey and someone else's lipstick. I didn't confront him, not yet. No, I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to think he'd won. I wanted him to keep digging the hole with his bare lying hands. Because when the truth came, I wouldn't whisper it. I'd drop it like thunder. The house was colder now, not in temperature, but in spirit. We barely spoke. When we did, it was transactional. "Did you take your medication?" he'd mutter. "The bills came today," I'd reply. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed. I was preparing for the final act. My health had declined rapidly in the last month. I'd lost weight, and walking to the mailbox left me winded. The doctors suggested a transplant, but I didn't have the heart to tell them I had stopped hoping. It wasn't the disease that broke me. It was the man I had built my life around, watching me fade and choosing her instead. Still, I held on to something he thought I'd already lost control. One Friday morning, I told him I needed help covering one last hospital bill, $12,000. I even handed him a fake invoice I had mocked up using an online template. I said it was urgent, that if I didn't pay it, they'd cut off part of my care. I watched his face carefully. He didn't blink. "I'm so sorry, Evie," he said, not even trying to fake remorse. I don't have that kind of money anymore." He was lying. We still had over $60,000 in our joint account, the one I'd let sit untouched on purpose. I'd watched as small amounts disappeared: weekly restaurant charges, hotel stays, expensive jewelry. He was funding their little fantasy with our life savings. So I gave him one last chance. "Maybe you could sell the Mustang," I asked, eyes wide, trembling hands. "It's worth more than the bill. It's just sitting in the garage." That car was his pride and joy, his midlife crisis trophy. I knew what his answer would be. "That car's the only thing I have left," he said without hesitation. "I can't give that up. Not me, not my care, the car." I nodded slowly and thanked him for being honest. That night, I called my lawyer and finalized the asset division. The private account was secure. The revised deed to the house now excluded his name. I even changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. To our granddaughter, he'd never see a cent. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table holding the folder of documents that would unravel everything. Thomas walked in yawning, wearing the new watch she must have given him. I smiled. "I need to talk to you," I said calmly, "and I want you to listen." He paused, sensing a shift. I slid the folder across the table. "This is everything. The finances, the accounts, the new deed. I moved all the money. The house is mine. You don't have to pretend anymore." He opened it, eyes scanning, fingers trembling. "I know about Colleen," I added. "The dinners, the hotels, the lies. I know everything." He looked up, pale as ash. "Evie, No," I said, my voice steel. "You failed the test." Thomas sat, frozen mouth slightly open, as if words might arrive late to save him. But they didn't. For once, silence suited him. I watched him flip through each page: the new deed, the notarized transfer, the bank statements, everything. His fingers twitched, as if he might tear them apart, but even he knew it was too late. "I lied," I said quietly, "about the money, about being broke, about needing your help." He looked up, jaw tight. "You lied to me?" "Yes," I replied, "just like you lied to me. I wanted to see what kind of man I married after 40 years, and now I know." His face contorted. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "You were waiting for me to die, hoping I'd vanish so you could play house with that cheap perfume bottle and heels." He stood, knocking the chair back. "How dare you?" "No, Tom. How dare you?" My voice didn't rise, but it hit like a hammer. "You were supposed to be my partner, my husband. You were supposed to love me, not when I was pretty, not when I was healthy, always." He ran a hand through his hair and paced. "It wasn't like that. Colleen, she was just someone to talk to." I laughed, hollow and bitter. "Did you whisper to her on my hospital nights? Did you talk to her at the hotel while I lay awake wondering if I'd make it to Christmas?" He looked down. I leaned in. "You didn't just cheat on me, Tom. You abandoned me." He was quiet for a long time. Then in a low, cracked voice, he asked, "So what now?" I folded my hands. "Now you leave. The house is mine. The accounts are closed. You get whatever's left in your wallet. That's more than what you gave me when I needed you." He blinked, stunned. "You're seriously kicking me out?" "You already left, Tom. I'm just locking the door behind you." It was like watching a man crumble from the inside. His face aged before my eyes. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the man I married, lost, ashamed, broken. But it didn't soften me. He made this bed with deceit and cowardice. Let him sleep in it. He packed a small bag that afternoon. No grand fight, no slamming doors, just quiet defeat. Before walking out, he stood in the doorway as if waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. And then he was gone. I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Not from my illness, but from carrying this weight for too long. For the first time in months, the house felt peaceful. It wasn't the ending I ever wanted, but it was the ending I deserved. I thought I'd feel triumphant when he left. I didn't, not right away. I sat in the stillness of my living room, surrounded by the echoes of a life that had already ended before the door ever closed behind him. The couch where we used to laugh at late-night comedies. The kitchen table where we planned our retirement. The hallway where he once danced with me in the dark. Gone, all of it hollow now. But grief, like disease, doesn't kill you all at once. It eats you slowly. And so I let it. I let myself cry. I let myself scream into pillows, smash a coffee mug, tear up old anniversary cards. Then I let myself breathe again. Days passed, then weeks. My health didn't improve, but I did. I woke up and made my own tea. I opened windows, lit candles, played music from when I was young and reckless. I wasn't just surviving, I was living again, even if the days were numbered. I heard from the boys eventually. They came by, noticed the missing photos of their father, the divorce papers on the sideboard. I told them everything, no sugarcoating, just the truth. They were angry at him, at themselves for not seeing the signs, but they stayed. They helped. They brought meals, called every day, and once they took me out to sit at the lake, just like we used to when they were children. Then one evening the doorbell rang. I didn't expect anyone. It was Thomas. He stood on the porch, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days, eyes sunken, clothes wrinkled, no watch, no pride. Just a man who lost everything because he gambled on lust and lost. Colleen left, he said simply, said she never signed up to be with a broke old man. I didn't flinch. That's what happens when you confuse lust with love. He looked down. I made a mistake. No, I replied, you made a choice. He opened his mouth, but I stopped him. I'm not angry anymore, Tom. I was, for a long time. But now I just feel sorry for you. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I shook my head. No, that chapter's closed. He nodded once, eyes moist, and turned to leave. He didn't fight. He knew. I watched him walk away for the last time. Later that night, as I lay in bed alone, yes, but free, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I had finally chosen myself. In sickness and pain and solitude, I chose me. And that made all the difference. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. I didn't tell it to gain sympathy. I told it because sometimes the worst thing someone can do is give you exactly the clarity you've avoided all your life. My illness didn't destroy me. Betrayal did. But I survived. If you're going through pain, abandonment, or heartbreak, I want you to remember, you deserve love that doesn't waver when times are hard. You deserve someone who stays when staying is hardest. And if they don't, you walk away head high. Even with broken bones, a broken heart, or broken trust, there's strength in choosing yourself, always.